I guess I really hadn't thought about, what this trip would or should inspire in other people. It was more of a personal adventure for me. I've been running dogs for a long time. I'm getting old. My dogs are getting old. The idea of, or the possibility, the opportunity to have one long, final trip with the dogs was, just something that, was really important to me. And also I was participating in this event because my friend Stephanie Johnson wanted to do it, and she wanted to have somebody to train with and, kind of have some inspiration to get through the season. And so I was happy to do that. I don't have enough dogs of my own to put together a team, and she has more dogs than she needs, so that was a really good, good opportunity to run her dogs and help her, and we both, kind of inspired each other to keep going and training and getting ready for the trip. I guess I hope, if somebody's interested in this event and finds, reads about it or hears about it, hopefully it will, if they have an interest in doing something, similar, or a dream that they've had, that they will make the effort to kind of go after it and accomplish it.
What's possible for people who are able to pursue such a dream? What opening, what learning, what type of challenge is it?
Well, you just never know what you're getting into. I mean, anytime you, take on a big project, you just really don't have any idea, how things are going to work out, or what's going to happen, what you're going to need to do, or confront or overcome. I think you need to be kind of ready to kind of deal with anything and everything that comes up. And
during the Serum Run, you visited and interacted with numerous villages. What do you think connecting with these communities makes possible for them or for you? Tell me about that experience.
Well, going along this trip, most of the places that we stop are villages along the way, and so there's kind of a couple aspects to the villages. One is the original Serum Run, and they were all locations where a local person from that community, made the effort, made the sacrifice, took on a big risk to, use their dogs and, run their team from, point A to point B to move that serum down the, trail. And, so being able to be in each of those places and kind of pretend, oh, I'm one of those people. I, did this from point A to point B to point, C, and just remember that, that event, that, that work that, that those people, took on. They didn't have any, obligation. They didn't get paid. They didn't, they just, there was a crisis. There was a need that needed to be met, and people just stood up and did what needed to be done to get the serum down the trail. So that was nice to be able to talk to people in the villages about somebody from your community did this 75 years ago, or how many ever years ago it was, and hopefully that community remembers that person and recognizes the sacrifice they made. And personally for me, it's just Alaska is an interesting country, an interesting, terrain, territory. I mean, just the, how people, survive and survive well in really remote, isolated areas. It's just, it's just a whole lot of fun to travel through and see, see the communities and, and just marvel at how people are, really able to thrive and, be successful and in, in conditions that, most people just are not going to want to put up with. And people could move out of the villages and go somewhere else, but it's just really, it's nice to see that there are still people out in the villages and living a subsistence lifestyle. And yeah.
What core cultural values do you most admire about the people in those communities?
The communities, I think what unites them all and is really important in the communities is just this the self-sufficiency, the ability to to get along and get by with very limited resources, but people do rely on each other, and and people are, will step up and help. I mean, we're this group of, white, wealthy people, just, going on this, adventure. I haven't, really sacrificed anything to be able to do this. And there's these, these people, they welcome us into the community. We're just this like, oh, we're going to show up and, where can we stay and this and that and the other thing. And, and they're happy to, to welcome us. And, I think they recognize we're, doing something that's kind of physically hard and sort of different, but it's, it just is just so nice that people are so welcoming and just, supportive, encouraging, I think that's kind of what you get from the village. Every place we stayed was welcoming. There were people there. They were interested in what we were doing. Every run that I was able to participate in was good. There were some parts of the trail that were a little hard, a little discouraging, kind of slow, but for the most part, I just had nothing but fun running my dogs for 6 days.
You trained hard for this expedition, and you were well prepared to take it all the way. But fate intervened. What was your initial response to the accident? And has that begun to shift? Can you give us some insight into the process of integrating what's happened?
I did put a lot of effort into training the dogs and all of the work involved in preparing the materials necessary, the food drops and that. And so when I wasn't able to continue on, when I got hurt, I obviously I was disappointed. I don't really have any other sort of feeling other than that at this point. It's one of those things that, I can't change it, so it doesn't do any good to be upset about it. And I've never been hurt in a way like this before, so I'm not really sure how to deal with it. I can't do anything. I can't walk, so I can't go out and see my dogs. I can't do anything to help take care of the obligations that I have. I have to rely on other people to do that, and that's frustrating and upsetting to me. But I also, I had hit my head and had a concussion, and I'm really tired and sort of lethargic, and so I think, that's just kind of been, I just, really haven't thought much about anything. I'm just trying to heal and get to a point where I can sort of help take care of myself and my dogs and other obligations that I have.
And where are you at now? I mean, it's still new, but how long has it been? 10 days?
A week.
A week. Just tell us about the healing process you're experiencing.
Well, I guess I wouldn't say sort of. I don't have any idea what the healing will be. You know, I mean, you know, nothing surprise. I guess nothing surprises me. I'm just waiting to feel better, waiting to be able to put weight on my legs so that I can, you know, do something. I'm, you know, I'm not a very I don't know what the word is. I don't really sort of like think about things and, oh, well, what does this mean and what does that mean? I just sort of deal with what happens. And so I got this injury. It's just got to get better. There's nothing really I can do about it other than following the, you know, doctor's orders. So, you know, I'm not very philosophical about things. I'm pretty stoic about, you know, kind of what I've got to do and deal with. So I haven't really thought, you know, kind of thought about things or imagined things. I'm just hoping that sooner rather than later I'll be back on my feet. You know, things happen, and I'm not going to try to put any sort of, you know, meaning to them. It's like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have done this, you know, maybe I was, you know, stupid to try to do. I'm not going to think about, you know, those kinds of things. It's just, you know, I did what I did and something happened and now I've got to go get on with things. Well, I think my background, my heritage, you know, I'm Norwegian bachelor farmer, Lake Wobegon territory. That yeah, you know, it's like, well, you know, it's just happened, and then, you know, you just have to, you know, go on and do the next thing. I haven't sat down and cried. I want to go to my dog house and see my dogs cry. But, you know, that's not going to affect what I'm doing. I mean, I just have to just go on with whatever's next.
In what ways did you observe yourself and your team evolving on the trail? Was there an aha moment that you remember?
You know, going down the trail with the dogs, every day was an aha moment because we didn't have really good training conditions here, so we weren't even on a sled until January. So we didn't have a whole lot of time. We weren't able to get a long, you know, overnight kind of camping trip done. And we didn't have long trails, and we only had one trail, so the poor dogs were kind of doing the same thing over and over again. And, you know, you just, you know, have no idea, you know, well, what are they going to do when they, you know, have to go, you know, 50 miles, 60 miles, you know, sleep overnight and go the same thing the next day. You know, we rarely ran 2 or 3 days in a row. It's usually, you know, a break in between. So just, you know, that the dogs were great. I mean, every run. The first day was really hard. It was long. It was longer than what we expected, and we had to go through some really, really deep, soft snow. And, you know, they just, you know, they never stopped. You know, and just, you know, I mean, I guess that's sort of expected. I mean, you kind of, you know, the dogs are always, you sort of know in the back of your mind that the dogs are always able to do more than what you know, think you can or what you have, you know, done. But that they so happily and willingly do it.
Does that inspire you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No. Yeah. That inspires me. It you know, makes me want to be better at taking care of them and you know, figuring out how to, you know, feed them properly and make sure that they're get good rest and that I'm efficient, when I get into the checkpoint, that I can be really efficient at taking care of them so that they can get a good rest. And no, absolutely. The fact that, they're doing all of the work, but that, it certainly inspires me to work hard to take care of their needs.
I've heard that dog mushing leads you to the root of yourself. What does that mean exactly for you?
Dog mushing for me it's a really funny thing. I just fell into dog mushing. It was a fluke. I had come to Alaska to visit some friends from law school, and I had was taking a break from work, and one of their friends, he was a dog musher, and so he ran his dogs in the winter and fall, winter, spring, and then he practiced law in the spring, summer, early fall, and he needed a handler that I was came up here, and I think it was September of 1990, and I just happened to, it was a fluke that I ran into him, but he needed somebody to help him at his kennel that winter, and and given that I'd always had this thought that my Norwegian heritage is, I ought to live somewhere in the north and have a winter experience, and so I thought sort of physically I was always kind of chubby, so I was kind of had the Arctic sort of body kind of to survive the cold. So I did it just as this sort of kind of opportunity to, oh wow, that sounds like an interesting thing to do. I didn't like dogs. I'd been bit by dogs a couple times. We never had dogs as pets, but I thought these guys, they were like cows. You just fed them whatever. Well, I just totally fell in love with it, and stayed doing that handling job for 3 years, and as part of that was able to run the Iditarod, and then decided I wanted to stay in Alaska and get my own, have my own dogs. But so yeah, I really, being kind of more physically active, having to take care of yourself, kind of doing something that you're kind of not quite the 19th, 20th century. You're sort of more back in the old days. I kind of always have thought I was born in the wrong century. I would have been happier in the 1800s, but probably not really. But so dog mushing really has been important to me as just a physical activity, a fun thing to do, just a real kind of test of your ability to kind of deal with things as they come up, because you just anything can happen out on the trail, and you gotta just be prepared to deal with it. And so I really think dog mushing has helped me kind of, I guess, sort of meet that potential, or that kind of idea that I've always had, that I'm kind of like misplaced in the the technological world, and sort of doing the dog mushing is, although I know they do a lot, people are real technical with their dog mushing these days, but it really it has been a very important part of my life.
It kind of bridges you to sort of another aspect of a self that you know about very deeply, but aren't maybe able to contemporarily express.
Yeah, I think that it does help me. I guess it just lets me participate in an activity that just seemed really natural to me. you know, that, yeah, there was just kind of something in me that was a dog musher. And, you know, but I never thought that before I happened to end up, you know, working for this guy. It's not like, I mean, I feel so, just so fortunate. I mean, there are people who just do nothing but dream of running dogs and running the Iditarod. And I don't know that I'd even really heard of the Iditarod before I ended up helping, you know, this guy, you know, at his kennel. And so, you know, I feel so fortunate that somehow I just, you know, lucked into that. Yeah. Because it's been a big part of the last 30 years of my life, for sure.
Birthdays are always opportunities to check in with your innermost sense of self. But something tells me that remote dog mushing is going to conjure that kind of self-reflection anyway. Do you have ahas on the trails that felt transformational?
I think the first few days were pretty tough for me. Number one, the dogs had never seen trees. Number two, my dogs had never been, 3 of them had been out of Nome before on a plane in a crate. They had never been in a dog box. So my worries were probably how they were going to do on the new trails, the narrow trails. And in Nome, everything is so wide and expanse, and there's no trails. We follow snow machines. So that was my biggest fear, is just what they would do on with these new experiences. And I guess the further I went down the trail, I realized that how flexible they are to the different challenges, and how flexible I was. I had to learn some pretty technical sled driving skills around big trees, which I pretty much had not done, being from Nome and not having that type of trail. We had a couple unexpected long days. Our first day was supposed to be 28 miles, and it ended up being almost 50 miles. So that aha moment of me worrying so much about whether or not they can do this was something that happened where they're more flexible than I am. I worry more than they do. They just go with the flow and just continue to move forward. And I guess so my fears were lessened, just kind of being on that sled and watching them take on all these challenges that I was so concerned about.
Did you have any ahas on the trail that were transformational, personally?
I think my aha transformational moments, there were so many, but just believing in myself and which I've always done. I pride myself on being very self-sufficient, and I think I did a very good job of doing that on this trail, and being able to not only take care of myself but take care of my dogs without the support of the snow machiners. So for me, some of the mushers use them to cook for their dogs and do those types of chores, and for me, I wanted to do it myself. And I did it, and that was a very proud moment. And being able to take care of the dogs and these little, sore wrists or sore shoulders, and realize that there are certain things I can manage on my own, and just being independent. And I've always been independent, but this is a whole different independent. This is, when you're at 50 below, it's life or death. And I don't mean that in a dramatic fashion, but these dogs have to be fed. They have to have certain nutrition to keep them at the peak level in these temperatures. And I think all of the dogs were losing a little bit of weight. But me, because I have gnome dogs, they have heavier coats and tougher feet, I think, than some of the racing dogs that were on the expedition. So they made my job just a little bit easier. But I think the transformation is that I was able to do it by myself. And I'm not saying I didn't have support. People carried my supplies. I couldn't do that by myself on this long thing. But as far as dog care and my own care and being able to manage, I did it myself. And that, for me, is huge. My journey along this trail, it's something I've dreamed about for many years. I'm not a racer and never really have aspired to be a racer. I like to compete against myself and train my dogs to compete against themselves in whatever's given to us, whatever challenges. In mushing and Nome, you're dealing with strong winds and low snow, and we have no trail groomers. We have no people going out ahead of us, and doing that kind of thing. So for me, seeing something besides this wide expanse of tundra and sea ice was just a dream. I read all of the books that I can find about different explorers that have come in the past, and about the SERUM Run and the history of the trappers and the miners and how they've used dogs. And so for me to actually travel through some of these areas that I've read about in the last 15 years that I've lived in Alaska has just, it was amazing. And, in Galena, I'm taking care of the dogs, and a man walks up to me, and he was the grandson of one of the original SERUM Run people. So for me, that was so special to be able to meet him. And his last name was Evans, and I keep forgetting his first name, but his grandfather was Charlie Evans, and one of the original SERUM Run mushers. So to sit and chat with him about his family and the history of his family was what it was all about for me. And going through Ruby and meeting some dog mushers there, and how they are still using their dogs traditionally. Matter of fact, a funny thing happened with the guy in Ruby. I had some booties, and I said, "Would you like these for your sled dogs?" And he said, If I have dogs that need booties or coats, I'm not going to have those dogs. So traditionally speaking, you breed for tough feet, strong coats, and they don't need those things, So I thought that was pretty funny when he gave me that answer. But just that the journey to see these parts of Alaska that have such historical meaning for the state and the people and the city of Nome, where would we be without the SERUM Run? Where would Nome have been without, having that medicine brought into town? It might have changed the whole history of Nome. So that's interesting. The other thing is I am on the board of the National Historic Trail Alliance, Iditarod Trail Alliance. So I've learned a lot about the historic portion of the trail, which actually starts in Seward and goes to Nome. So being traveling that trail with that role was pretty special for me too. Just learning the history and being able to say that I've actually traveled that historic trail. It's on the National Registry of Historic Trails. So that was pretty awesome to be able to say that. And again, the dogs traveled more than I did. I rode. So I've spent the last 15 years in Alaska. I moved in February of 2005. I've been a mental health therapist for about 27 years, back on the East Coast, and then since moving to Alaska. And I've traveled into the villages for my work and met some amazing people. The resilience of the people in the regions I've traveled are amazing. They do so much with so little. Jobs and money and other types of resources. And a lot of times, I use the lessons that we don't need everything at our fingertips. And I think that that's one of the things that people have taught me across the region. And they're strong people and good people. I can't recall going into one of these villages on our trip that we weren't completely accepted, and then people coming to us and saying, my grandfather had dogs, or my mom had dogs, or we used to have dogs, I remember, and listening to these stories and how they used to use the dogs, whether it was for trapping or hunting out on the sea ice, and bringing seal or other types of marine animals in. But I spent 10 years working at the Nome Youth Facility, and it recently closed due to budget cuts. But those kids, of course, my office had a lot of mushing pictures, and sometimes the mushing pictures were what opened doors for my conversation with kids. And I talk about my challenges on the trail and their challenges in life. And I remember one time I was talking to a kid from, I think, Ambler up in the Kotzebue region, and there's a race that goes from Kotzebue to Kobuk called the Kobuk 440, and everyone knows they don't refer to it as the Kobuk 440, it's just the 440. And one student asked me, are you going to run 440 someday, Miss Johnson? And I said, I don't know, that's a tough race. And they said, you can do it. You're always telling us we can do it, you can do it. And I remember that so clearly. And I remembered it a lot on the trail. As these kids, I tell them they can do it. They can overcome, their addictions or their abuse and make new lives for themselves. And and I have to do the same. I can't be just the preacher. I have to internalize the words I use with my own clients. And it's pretty amazing. I love the people of this region and the Kotzebue region that I've worked with. And again, their resilience over hundreds of years just is amazing, and still is. They a lot of obstacles, but they continued to thrive.
Okay, wonderful. Can you describe the biggest challenges that you had to face again and again? Were there obstacles you hadn't expected that you just had to deal with as best you could?
I think the obstacles that I had to face again and again were, I have trail dogs. The other mushers have race dogs. So I was always an hour to 2 hours behind everyone. And not because my dogs weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They traveled along very nicely, but I just don't have the speed of the race dogs. And I knew that coming in. But sometimes I felt guilty that I was holding the trail breakers up, and I wanted them to go faster, and I can't expect that of them. So that was always a challenge, is that guilt of holding not the front runners, because they're already there feeding and getting their own dinner, but there was a trail breaker that I was holding up. And so that guilt of knowing how cold they are sitting on that snow machine waiting on me to get where I needed to be, I guess, was something that I struggled with. And not so much wishing the dogs were faster, because it is what it is. I'm only as fast as my slowest dog. But the other thing, I guess, the obstacle was not so much. I never got cold on the back of the sled. I had hand warmers and foot warmers, and I dressed correctly. But the biggest challenges that I had were bootying the dog, anything with dexterity where you couldn't have your gloves on. And we all have a lot of cracks and calluses and peeling skin on our fingers that you just can't help. And so that happened over and over. And every checkpoint is still happening because now they're more sensitive. And so with those temperatures, doing the basic anything, I couldn't turn on my headlamp because my tips of my fingers were so sore. So I couldn't zip my jacket. So those were some things that were troublesome, I guess. I guess the as far as the trails go, just maneuvering over some of the terrain was difficult. My sled was built by Phil. He built it for me for this as a surprise. And it's amazing sled. It drives really nice, but it's heavy. So when I'm going over the hills, I'm pushing a lot, or running behind the sled. So really that wasn't much of an issue until we got to the coast where we were on some hills. But I definitely felt that in my own endurance, my own soreness the next morning. But yeah, so those are the two biggest obstacles I think I had.
In what ways did you and your dog team evolve on the trail? Was there a specific kind of progress that you could describe or explain?
Wow, the team just gelled. They really exceeded my expectations as far as being able to move down the trail. A lot of my dogs had never camped before, the little small campings, but nothing anywhere near this. So watching them know exactly what to do each day, watching me walk outside, they get up, I feed, they lay back down after they eat, then I booty them, and then we hook up and we leave, and then it repeats. And I know people who race, that's not a big issue for them. It just happens. That's what the dogs are trained to do. But mine weren't. And so watching them be able to do that routine that they're supposed to, like they knew exactly what they were supposed to do before we got here or something. It was just really weird because I didn't know what they would do, especially like the first or second night of camping. The other thing is just watching them be able to travel longer and longer with their endurance, and surprising me every time. You get, I kind of referred to the dogs as the sundowners, because during the afternoon sun they're kind of sluggish moving along, and we're just like, feels like we're going at a snail's pace. And as soon as the sun would go down, their speed and endurance would just really kick in an extra notch. And I'm like, where did that speed or that burst of energy come from? But I think that because most of my dogs, and Drizzle's an exception here, have very heavy coats, that they get hot when that sun's beating down on them. So, when I'm hot, I don't want to go as you want to slow down a little bit to conserve your energy and stay cool. But once the sun went down, they were really kicking it in a few notches. So one of my biggest fears, I guess, over the last few days have been going through these Topcock Hills where we went yesterday. And so I think one of the moments that definitely helped me and really gelled this experience is they were rocking these hills. And I don't know if a few of them have been through the hills before because I've traveled that trail myself. And I don't know if they recognize it. I think they did. We came into Unalakleet, which is the first time we hit the Bering Sea coast several days ago, and we got about 8 miles from town, and they just tails started wagging, tails went up, speed increased, and we flew into Unalakleet after 40 some miles on the trail. But I think they smelled the coast. I think they really smelled that Bering Sea. And then coming off of the Topcock Hills yesterday, they did exactly the same thing. And so seeing that enthusiasm and that endurance, and just when I think they're gonna just be sluggish and go into these places, they're just beating every expectation I ever had. And just the fact that on the trail they look to me, and they're just amazing. And I can't sorry, what they did over the last 750 miles is amazing to me, because I've never done anything like this. I've read about it, and now I've done it. And I just couldn't be more proud of them and of me. So I'm very emotional, sorry. So Drizzle is 7 years old, and she's kind of been my baby since she was born. She and her sister. Her sister actually went home from the trip in Manly. Her head just wasn't in it. We don't exactly know why. She wasn't injured. I have a suspicion that she was very nervous and scared of the trees. And so she just kind of froze. And so we were in Manly, and another musher that was with us had a dog truck there, and I saw an opportunity for her to go on home before I would have to fly her home. And so I made that decision, which was very hard. But yesterday we were coming, right before we got onto the Topcock Hills, we went through some overflow, and Drizzle and another dog was in lead, and the other dog, Molly, kind of was jumping into the snow to avoid the ice, and Drizzle broke through, and she was pretty much, all I saw was her nose sticking out of the water. And fortunately, she jumped out pretty fast, but her body was covered in ice for, even though I put a coat on her and took her wet stuff off. She had one of the harness rub t-shirts. Even though that stuff was off, I felt like she needed a night in the house just to get the chill off. She's not the best eater, which is not a good thing for a sled dog, and she's spoiled rotten, so it was an opportunity for her to warm up and have a good night's rest before we take off to home. So we're moving home, and she knows this trail, and we are gonna head on out.
What is it about that trail that called to you viscerally?
So one of the reasons why I was captivated by this trail is I like history, I like the outdoors, and I like dogs. And so going to Nome by dog team had that historical aspect, following along the traditional SERUM RUN trail from 1925, had the history aspect, and so all of that was very appealing, coupled with the fact that, you know, I'm not, at this stage of my life, I'm not going to be competitive in racing because of my age, so the idea of doing it in a non-race format was somewhat appealing. One of the circumstances and challenges we faced was when the trip got started, the trail boss had come in from Nome by snow machine, and he was not there at the start. So the very first day, things kind of went awry because 4 machiners and 1 musher took off for Old Minto, but the trail was not marked, and that left 4 mushers and 2 snow machiners kind of out there not having a clue where we were, and we were lost for many, many hours. Eventually the trail boss had arrived in Old Minto. My husband had used a satellite phone to communicate with the group organizer's wife about our being lost, and the last communication we had was, "Someone will look for you tomorrow morning," and it was with great relief that about 20 minutes later the trail boss, who had finally made it to Old Minto and said, "Where is everyone?" had come out to look for us and found us, and we had missed the destination because the trail was not marked by about 10 miles, and he brought us back. So we got in very late the first night to Old Minto, and that was a challenge because from there on out, I would say, it's fair to say I was somewhat sleep deprived, and then we had a number of mishaps on the trail. Things like we had a snow machine that caught fire, so we had to make arrangements to bring another snow machine. One of our mushers was hit by a snow machiner outside of Galena, so arrangements had to be made to medevac her. We had another member who had a medical issue, which the village clinic thought was serious, so he was medevaced. My husband on Caltag Portage rolled his machine and injured his back, and he had to fly out of Unalakleet. So a lot of challenges, coupled with the fact it's not a groomed trail. When you do Iditarod, the trail is pretty well marked and pretty well groomed, and this was more of a wilderness adventure, so it was not. So the trail was challenging at times with snow that was somewhat deep for the dogs to go through and punchy. One of the attractions of this trip was to go to the villages in a slightly more relaxed fashion than Iditarod. And we stayed in schools and community centers, and generally when we came into the villages, if it wasn't too late at night, and there were some late nights, we were greeted by children, we were greeted by elders, we were greeted by someone whose father had done the SERUM Run, and so the kids really loved seeing the dogs. They loved helping take the booties off the dogs, petting the dogs, so that was really nice. And then the villages were very hospitable. We typically had some sort of either potluck or someone made cake or cookies or something, so that part was really great. I'd say my one regret is that we didn't have more downtime planned, so we could actually have spent some really good time in the village. If you are a musher, you spend a lot of time on dog chores.
In what ways did you observe yourself and your team evolving?
So I normally train my dogs, and over the years I've had some wonderful leaders. This year I was so busy doing logistics for the SERUM Run in addition to my full-time job that I did not train my dogs. I relied on my handlers to train my dogs, and they're very good handlers, but it's not the same as training your own dogs in terms of the bond. So I brought with me an older leader who was 9, and then a dog who had done the Iditarod before named Homer, figuring they'd be my main leaders, and I had a couple younger dogs who had just started to go into lead, 2- and 3-year-olds, and I thought that's how it was going to be. Unfortunately for me, about 2 days into the trip, one of my females came into heat, followed by another, followed by a third, so I had 25% of my team in heat at at the early stages until Unilaclete, with 2 more dogs starting to go into heat around Unilaclete. That made for a management nightmare, in all honesty. I had never driven a team fueled by hormones like this before, because it is my practice never to bring a dog in heat on the trail, and here I had 25% of my team, soon to be 40% of my team, going into heat. So the upshot of this was my main leader that I was relying on, Homer, wouldn't lead. All he was thinking about was getting to the girls. So he was not good about lining out. He was turning back into the team, and I only had limited room to space out the dogs, so I really couldn't get him far enough away from the females. Even my neutered male was interested. It was amazing. So it was pretty rough and rocky the first probably 10, 12 days. Marla, who was one of the mushers, suggested in Unilaclete when my husband was being thrown out that I leave behind, or I send with him, 3 of the girls in full-blown heat, which I did. And that made for much easier management. The others were just starting to go into heat, and I figured I'd be at no. Once I got rid of the 3 hot girls, things went a little bit smoother. The dogs were no longer popping the hook at every stop. I used my 9-year-old alternating with my 2 younger girls. And I'd say the one girl I had been told did not know how to line out, which is to keep the team tight. And I'd say by the time we got to White Mountain, she was picking up the hang of it and has emerged to be quite a good leader. I was very impressed with her, but I alternated those dogs. But that was one of the challenges, was not having really solid leaders on this trip and having to deal with the heat issue. But I think my aha moment was by the time we got to White Mountain, I felt that they were getting their act together. And when we got to where the Topcock Hills were, the team was finally kind of gelling with the new leaders, having some sort of clue where they were going. They still tended to get confused in the villages. The amount of stimuli, the dogs barking and stuff like that, I had problems getting in and out of every single village, but once I got them moving, it was fine. So some of the defining moments on the trail. The first day when we were lost was really not a positive experience. It made me concerned about the not Phil's leadership, but the how the group was moving on down the trail. When someone says, "Well, go look for you in the morning," it's kind of a frightening thing. And so that was a defining moment. The next thing was when we were camping on the Yukon. We had 2 nights camping on the Yukon in a 120-mile stretch between Tanana to Ruby, where there's nothing, literally nothing. And the first night we got in, it was just getting to be dark. We went to set up the one tent, and lo and behold, my husband had somehow inadvertently not packed the stovepipe. So we had a tent, but it was also about -50 and no heat source. So at that point, we tried to, I stayed in someone else's tent that night. The next night, of course, it was again very cold, probably -50 by my experience. And we had 5 of us packed into Gil's tent, which was a 2-person tent. And his stove did not work either. And my husband and the trip organizer are fairly big men, and so it was pretty crowded. We're sleeping on basically the ground on snow, and it was pretty cold and miserable. So that was a really, really difficult time for me. And then the other defining moment was the snow machine catching on fire when I happened to walk by the school and just, heard a big bang, smoke billowing, people running to get fire extinguishers and drag the machine on fire out. So those were some of the calamitous moments. Some of the positive moments, and the calamitous moments made you wonder if you'd ever make it to Nome with this particular constellation of people. But the positive moments, once we hit the coast, the scenery was beautiful. The Blueberry Hills, Topcock Hills, getting up those. There were 2 very, very, very long hill climbs out of Elam. Probably one of the longest hill climbs I've done other than McLaren's Summit. And again, I had a relatively inexperienced team. I was down to 9 dogs, and so was really happy to finish that day without the team quitting and just going forward. So I have to give them a lot of credit for allowing me to coax them over the top.
What did you have to pull from deep within in order to cope, in order to keep it together, in order to stay positive for the sake of everyone, including yourself? I mean, what did you call upon?
So in terms of what I needed to do to get through the many challenging moments on the trail, and some of them were, I have 2 bad knees. I'm turning 69 soon, so I'm not a young woman, so I don't have the stamina I did 10 or 11 years ago. But essentially, I'm a very goal-oriented person. And so I had 3 things that were major goals of mine in life, 2 of which I've accomplished. And the third one was gained to know my dog team, which turned out to be the hardest. It took me 24 years to accomplish. But I think that the fact that I'm goal-oriented and the goal was to get to know him while I was still able to walk before I got any older was what got me through that. Just the motivation. In terms of getting through the adversities, the driving factor was the goal, that I wanted to accomplish my goal, and I'm very focused when I want to accomplish a goal in spite of some of the physical challenges I had, and I did have some other physical challenges which I won't go into, including a bad cold from the late hours, and I was just focused on I need to keep moving and get to know. So that's what I did. So in terms of how my dogs did, I have a race team. It's a really good race team. They come in off of 80-mile runs on a 300-mile race screaming. They eat like no dogs you've ever seen. They will eat everything in sight and everyone else's leftovers too. So, and they were known to, on more than one occasion, pop the hook to go after after food. But I think they enjoyed the diversity. It was new trails, with the exception of Homer and Haynes, who had done Iditarod. It was new trails for them. And they are champs at camping out now. Some of them were already pretty good where they immediately hit the straw. So I think they like the diversity. I'm sure with Lorikins, who emerged as probably the best of the young leaders that I tried out, she seemed to relish her role and seemed to grow into it as time went on, and reminded me, one of the things I was doing was carrying the ashes of Xena, who was one of my favorite lead dogs, one of my 2 favorite leaders. The other one's still alive, but she passed away in August on the trail, and so she reminded me a lot of Xena. And Xena loved the trail. She relished her role in the lead. She would lope down the trail effortlessly, a little dog, but with a lot of spirit. And Lorikins seemed to fall into that loop and seemed to really enjoy all the challenges the trail presented. My old guy will retire at the end of the summer. He did surprisingly well for a 9-year-old. He was really good. He was never stiff, and he seemed to enjoy it too. I don't know if he knew it was his last big hurrah, but he did good too. So I think generally they enjoyed it, and they certainly enjoyed the food and everyone's leftovers as well.
My name is Marla. I go by Marla Beebe, my initials, Marla Beth Brodsky. And I live in Western Massachusetts. I'm originally from outside Philadelphia. Currently this winter I'm living in Two Rivers, Alaska with 18 members of my Alaskan Husky sled dog team. I am the type of individual and woman that makes my dreams reality. That is my MO. That is something that I am modeling for my 15-year-old daughter. And she has made it clear, Mama, you're not a quitter. And she said, I knew you'd finish. And the goal was to finish with all 12 of my dogs on the line. And I did. So I am so proud of them and me. So my reason for doing this is I always wanted to bring my team back to Alaska to train and race. And this was the year that I could make that dream a reality. And I turned 60 in June of this year. And so I'm really going for everything that I want to do. Now is the time while I still can. In 2008, I apprenticed with Ali Zirkle and Alan Moore. I handled Iditarod for them. I was here in Nome at the finish. They retired a leader named Betty to me. She was the grand matriarch of my team, and I wanted to bring my team back to Alaska, back home. Originally I was just going to come and train, and okay, these dogs are ready to do this 100, 200, 300 mile race. And in the fall, I do dryland sprint mushing for fun, just because I love rig racing. And I'm a North American gold medalist in 4, 6, and 8 dog rig. I'm a 2-time ISDRA bronze medalist in 6 dog rig. IFSS is my gold medal. And I was invited to the World Championships this year in Sweden. And I do better in the 4, 6, and 8 dogs, but all I could afford to take was 4. And so I interviewed on Dogworks Radio with Robert Forto, and he's like, oh, you do mid-distance mushing in the winter. That's usually the people I interview, but all of Team USA was being interviewed. And then I was looking for, hey, when's my segment going to air? I'm going on his website, and I see SERUM RUN expedition applications due. And it was right at the deadline, right after it, and I contacted him and say, hey, can I still apply? And he said, sure. So we have to thank Robert for wanting to revive the SERUM Run for his, master's thesis project. And then we can stop thanking him there. But so it was the perfect goal, because it wasn't until mid-February. I couldn't get there until December because I was in Sweden, end of October. And then I had to place 6 of my senior dogs, Betty's pups, with foster homes while I was gone. And that took a whole month because they had to be in the right home. And they're with all my junior and senior handlers, so they're with family. And then I finally got here, and it gave me 2.5 months to acclimate my dogs to the cold, to build up the miles that we could never get back home. We couldn't finish the Can-Am 250 because we couldn't get the miles we needed to be able to go the distance. I can't get past 25 miles on an ATV in southern New England, western Massachusetts, and 18 miles on a sled. And I would go to northern Minnesota for 2 winters and Canada, southern Canada, for the month of January, and get on a sled and get the miles. And then I'd come home the last few winters to mud season every month. And to go from conditioning on a sled to a foot of mud on an ATV, it just messes with the dogs. Whole different set of muscles. So I could not get the training they needed. And people were starting to doubt whether my dogs could do mid-distance. They're like, yeah, she can do that dryland sprint and she can do the short miles. But you know what? Especially those Can-Am folk. My mom came to one of the races, and she said the checkpoint lady was like, I think her dogs, they just can't do this type of mid-distance mushing. You know what I have to say to that, don't you? I brought them to Alaska. I got to come back to Two Rivers, which is where I was going back and forth in '08. I had a young child at the time, so I could not make that commitment of working for a musher for the season. If I had done that, I probably would have done a 200-mile race my first or second winter. But I was raising a daughter, with a partner, and so I had to do what I could do and be responsible to my family. And so coming back to Two Rivers was like coming home with a lot of people I know. Kaz Zirkle, who's such a good woman, and other people in that community that I became friends with. And I was blessed with, in less than a week of being there, the temperatures were 20 degrees when we set up the dog yard. And within a week, they dropped to minus 30, and for 6 weeks stayed minus 30 to minus 50 in Two Rivers, interior Alaska, where it is known to be colder and one of the coldest. Colder than Willow, colder than Fox, than up in Murphy's Dome. And I put myself with the people that I knew and where I knew it would be cold, and boom, had to figure out what foxtails are, how to get them, how to dress dogs, how to get socks, how to mush them with their jackets, how to turn their t-shirts inside out so the fleecy doesn't create rub and grit like mud does, like sand does, how you put the wicking side on so you don't have ice crystals grinding into their pits. I learned so much about how to take care of dogs in extreme cold. So by the time the expedition came around, I was ready. There was one morning, it was a Sunday, and I would try to have coffee with Allie once a week. And she was saying, hey Marla, it's minus, 42 here, and down by Rhines, she said it's minus 48, and you really shouldn't mush your dogs in the minus 40s. They can come in and then cramp up afterwards if you don't have to, if they drop weight more. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not racing them. I'm preparing for expedition, so I want to go do 20, 25 miles, take my time in minus 44 to make sure we can do it. And I have the gear to do it. She loaned me her anorak that she didn't use. And I had to get beaver hat and beaver mitts. My first fear was, I can't mush in minus 20 degrees. I can't mush when it's colder than minus 20 because I didn't have the gear. Well, I started getting the gear, and so now I was able to prove to myself, you have the appropriate gear, the extreme cold weather gear, you can mush in minus 30, minus 40, and you're okay.
What made the Serum Run so appealing for you?
When the Serum Run came my way, I jumped on it because it seemed doable. It wasn't a race. I didn't have to do 1,000 miles in 9 days or 2 weeks. I had to do 50 miles basically every day over 18 days. And so the dogs get to rest at least as much as they're running. And everybody says they get stronger at the end. You build the team. And also we were initially, the expedition was starting with shorter legs, even though didn't end up that way, but that was how it was set up. So it looked really, I got this. Especially because I spent 2.5 months doing 30, 40, 50-mile runs. I took the team camping in the White Mountains, realized my North Face sleeping bag was worth bupkas. Got, the Wiggies warm. I learned, I worked out the kinks because I put in the work. I did what I had to do to put myself in situations that I could be in. And so the Serum Run really seemed manageable. We can do this because we can do 50-mile runs. It's just one a day, but it's continuous. That we've never done. We have never done 750 miles. We have never done 50 miles 18 days in a row. My dogs have never camped out more than a few days in a row at a race. They have camped out for 20 days and they're still camping out, and it's snowing right now in Nome, and we're going to get a foot of snow. And when we tried to put them in the boxes yesterday, they were like, they wouldn't go in. They're like, what's this? So the Serum Run seemed like, I can do this. I can build the team. I thought I'd have the time to massage them, take care of wrists, take care of shoulders. I learned early on that the heat pads freeze when they're outside in the freezing temps, so they actually fail. So shoulder jackets I didn't get to put on because I would have had to have the dogs inside, but I just rub them with the awesome Mountain Ridge Emu oil, and I sometimes put on wrist wraps to keep it from swelling. And basically, if you take the time, you put the care in with the dogs, and you do what they need, they're okay. And they they can keep going, and they do. They get stronger, they get better, and it's not a big deal. So, you know, sometimes I wish I could have massaged them more, but it was so cold. You know, I got frostbite on my fingers because I can only work barehanded, like on the Yukon River and minus 35 outside with them, where we were winter camping in our Arctic oven tents, and most of which weren't working. But still, I did everything that I possibly could with them. And they trusted me to feed them, to take care of them. I trusted them to take me down the trail and to do their very best. And, you know, they just, they make it look so easy. They just surpass. I mean, this is what I needed to learn for myself, that many other mushers know, that these dogs can do anything. And I now know that. You know, they've done 750 miles. My dogs that were sprint, dryland sprint, mid-distance, on distance, they're distance dogs. They have done everything, and they can do everything. It's just how you train them. I finally had the opportunity to train them the right way and to put in the hard work. Last year, I took every single client I could. I wore the Jonathan the Edward mascot husky uniform, driving around Stores, Connecticut, Yukon with my team to make the money that I needed so I could finally do what I've been wanting to do, which is bring my team back to Alaska. And I saw at the end how I built the machine, because they were running up the hills with me. They had gotten so strong, they made everything look easy. I would just stand on the runners. I didn't have to pedal, and they would just pull me right on up. I would ride at drag pad so they didn't have to go running down. And they had their I did a rod trot. I call it I did a run. I did a run. We did a lot of runs, and they always said yes. They never said no. And, you know, people said, are they having fun? They have fun when they run. They love running. Were they having fun camping out and, you know, the minus 40, you know, in the morning they're shivering. So, like, I say, Toto, I have a dog named Topaz, I sometimes call Toto. We're not in Kansas anymore, are we? You know, we're camping out on the Yukon, we're on the Bering Sea, you know, and yeah, it's cold, but all the other dogs, even the gnome dogs, are sometimes shivering too. It's just how, you know, so did they like the camping part? I think by the end, the last morning in Nook, it snowed, and they were just insulated with the snow. They actually looked pretty happy under the snow. So they loved the runs. There was so much diversity in terrain, so it didn't get boring. So the part of the SERUM Run, and the other reason why I had always wanted to do a SERUM Run, actually when I first came to Alaska and I heard about the SERUM Run, I was like, that's what I want to do, because I want to have the time to get into the villages and see the communities and meet the villagers, and that's part of the mission statement of the SERUM Run. Again, unfortunately, because our organizers were kind of clueless, they did not create enough time to really get into the villages. We were so busy with schlepping our gear in, feeding our dogs, bringing our gear in, setting up our beds, schlepping our stuff out, feeding our dogs, dressing them. So I realized that my experience with the villages were going to be in the places that we stayed. We stayed in community centers and tribal halls and in schools. And my experience with the villages was mostly with the kids. I had the dog team. I'm a touring and racing kennel back in Western Massachusetts, and my dogs, I bred all of them. I've held them all from the day they're born. They're used to people. They love being pet. So I was the team that you could always send the kids over to, or anybody over to pet, and they would be like, yes, oh, we miss our pets. We miss our hugs and loves. This has been a work winter. You know, we love the trail. Well, we do love our touches. And so the kids would come, and they always wanted to help, and I realized that they're awesome helpers. Well, would you like to help me carry this and carry that and pick up this and do that? And they're like, yes, and made them feel special. So that was what I enjoyed was meeting the different kids along the Yukon and in the Bering Sea, in the villages. Different experiences with them. I started giving out my stickers, which they all liked. And but that was what the Serum Run also incorporates as part of their mission statement, which was another reason it appealed to me. I wish we could have had more downtime to spend a little more time with the villagers. The last night in White Mountain, at noon that day, they were having an elder lunch. They were cooking lasagna. It was in the tribal hall. And when the elders came in, they were very warm and friendly. They were like, "Hi, who are you? My name is," and they wanted to talk. And I asked the people in the kitchen, they said, "Yes, this is for elders 55 and up." I'm like, "Oh, I'm 60. I was hoping they said, "Oh, would you like some food too?" Because if I could get a hot meal before I got on the sled for like 6 to 8 hours, I realized if you befriend the ladies in the kitchen, I figured that out a little bit too late at the end. You could get something hot. And I would have loved to sat down and had lunch with them, but we had to go. So, there was when the vet clinics happened where we mushers were, like in Galena, that was awesome, seeing the people in the community with their dogs. But the kids is who I connected with the most, and that makes sense because Hilltown Sled Dogs, we do the most with kids. That's our niche. Well, before I went on this, I spoke to some intuits because I had my fears. Would I be okay? The dogs be okay? We can do this. But the self-doubt, can we really do this? And at the beginning, and one of them said, "This is going to be transformational for you. You're going to come back a new person." And I liked that. And because I had been doing a lot of healing work, and I, always trying to shed the stuff you want to let go of and embrace the stuff you want to keep, and keep growing as a person, as an individual, and a woman in the world, and a role model for my daughter. And so at the beginning, I was like, okay, that second day when I had 2 dogs in the crate, I was like, I have to let go of fear and embrace trust. So I was like, every day I'm going to have a mantra. I'll let go of fear and embrace trust. And then when I ended up like not getting the bed and getting the room without heat, 2 days in a row, being really cold to sleep, I was like, okay, I'm going to embrace not complaining. I'm going to let go of complaining and embrace complimenting. Start complimenting people rather than speak up about what I'm not getting and look for the things I am getting. And then I think like shit hit the fan afterwards, and my mantra seemed to go away for a while. But and things did get more internally stressful. I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm spinning out on the things that I want to let go of, and how can I, I just had this confrontation with this person. I don't want to think about that on the trail. I want to be present in the scenery and the moment and my dogs, so I got to let it go. So I'm hopefully the transformation is still happening, and it will evolve now as I'm moving away from this. Because what was most meaningful for me, what was most positive, was being alone on the trail with my dogs. And the days I got to mush by myself were the best. There was a number of days I was first out, and I remember coming out to the Bering Sea, or is it Norton Sound, and the trail boss leads me through town on this. I remember I released from a snow machine and I went over a snowbank and I did a ski jump, but I'm a skier, so I can handle that, and he said, you didn't need to release so soon. I was going to go down a little farther with you. And then we're on the bay, which is glare ice, and you could see the dogs are like, where's the trail? But my little girl Trixie, she knew where the trail was. And then we come up which looked like on a railroad track, but it was gravel, and they're like, is this really where you want to go, because we got no traction here? And I'm like, yeah. And so they pull me up, and it was just this like twisty, turny, crazy little trail. And then we anytime my dogs hit the woods, forget it, they're flying. They love the woods, and it's like, hang on, because we're going around the turns. And then we come out to icebergs. And it just looks like we're going out to sea. And I'm like, okay, we're going here, right? I see we've diverged off of the Iron Dog Trail. This is just the Serum Run Trail, but I see the markers, and he said we're going here, and Trixie's picked up his trail, and so we're going here. There's all the mountains there on my right, and there's all the sea, and the icebergs over there on my left, and our trail is weaving through the icebergs, and but I'm trusted, and it was like scary at first. But then the longer I'm out there, I got it. I got how he was thinking. We were basically following the coast, following the mountains, and going by sea because it was frozen. And it was just expansive. And I loved that it was challenging. You had to find the trail. And my leaders always found the trail. And knowing I could trust Trixie, my littlest dog with the biggest attitude, who gets in trouble half the time at home because she's probably bored out of her mind, and she's like, when am I going to get something that I can really sink my teeth into? When am I going to get a job I'm worthy of? And my handler back home, Erin, we're like, Trixie seems a little depressed. I said, yeah, because I keep putting her in the middle of the team so she doesn't cause trouble in the front of the team when we're doing like tours or whatever, and I said, but now in Alaska, she's finally got a job she's worthy of. And she's going every day for miles, and she's relentless. And she always knew where the trail was. She never went backwards. She always went forward. She never doubted herself. She was my go-to gal. She did get me in a little bit of trouble in town when she realized that behind every house there was a dog on a long line, and she always wanted to then go visit and like, who are you? I'm Trixie, and I'm the boss. I was like, so I need to start having people kind of escort me out of town. I said, find out where the dogs are and let's keep Trixie away from them. Here comes, every time I'm leaving town, a loose dog comes running towards us, and I got to slam on the brakes or hurry up and get by them. It's like, because Trixie finds them. She's on the gang line, and we're at another village, and the dogs run loose in that village, and this black dog is running towards us, and we're trying to scare it away. And next thing I know, Trixie undoes her snap and is running after the dog. It's like, what are you doing here? Who are you? I'm in charge. It's like, oh my God, thank goodness it was a male. And then she got all happy to visit. If it was a female, forget it. So, so she did have her double-edged sword there, but as far as all the time on the trail was phenomenal. And she's amazing. They're amazing. They can do. I knew that I could trust her. We're on the Yukon River, and it's at night, and the winds are blowing. There's no more trail, and it's drift. And some dogs get scared of the wind or when they can't see the trail. And you say, "Yep, let's go," and she's just like, "Do do 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 do." She's like, "Yep, I got you, Mom. We're going." I can't say there's one defining moment for me at this time. There were just a lot of moments on the trail with my dogs. There were multiple moments when the dogs taught me what they can do. And it was like the moment at night on the river in the wind. It was, I might be sore one day, but now I'm not. And I would associate, ooh, I just did a really hard Taekwondo workout. Yeah, I'm stiff the next day. Sometimes it's hard walking down the stairs, but once I start jumping and kicking, I'm good again. So I would kind of at the beginning relate to how I might feel after a hard workout, but it doesn't mean I'm hurt. Just me. And so I learned how the dogs, I watch them literally get up a little stiff, shake it off, start lubricating, start working. I always, started them slow, and then you'd see them just kind of relax. Something I tried to do every day is I always would put circle of protection around us. I always thank all of my spirits and universe and forces and ask them to keep us safe and sound and healthy, whole and happy all the way to Nome and back home. And I would put that circle of protection around us every day, every mush. And I would send green healing energy to them for their bodies, and I would send blue healing energy just for them to relax and be calm. And then I would send the white light. To me, I always call them my beings of bright white light, and just that universal force that they have, that bright, radiant light. And so I always would do that. That was another way that I would spiritually support them. And I would include me in that too, because my circle was actually a heart that would be drawn in front of the nose of the leaders and go all the way back to the tail of the sled and end up in the point. And then I would expand it into the dogs that are still back in the yard and home, and like layers of a larger heart. And then I would always invoke my Malamute lightning, and I would put my team inside her ethereal body and see her actually running us down the trail, because knowing she'll always protect us. And that always made me feel safe. So that was my personal thing that I always did. And but as far as the different terrain we mushed on, different days had different levels of excitement. Some days that was so much fun. And I do know that the day that we were leading, because some of the other teams were having their own stuff going on, and we come to this hill and it's in the woods, and they just literally ran up the hill. And I'm like, this is what it feels like to see a team just grow and come together and get so strong and so in sync that they can just keep on going and do anything. This is what it feels like. And this is me and my team. We can do anything. And those people who thought we couldn't, oh, did you have this many miles on you before you started this? It's like every individual, every team is different. I knew what I was doing, and I did the work. And we 100% succeeded. All 12 dogs on the line the whole time. And I didn't get hurt either. I mean, I got, when we were going around that icy S-turn, and I went into my snow, I got a bruise on my nose, I got some windburn on my cheek, my body's sore and achy, but I have to say, being on the sled with the team is just like, I'm so at home on a sled, I'm so at home on skis, and having that team pull me on my sled, on my little Dandler lightweight little racing sled, it was just, we're one, and that's where I was at home. I was like, wow, what's going to feel like when we're not doing this every day? Because I put so many hours on the sled, on the runners, and it's home for me, and it's natural. And that's one of the reasons I love mushing. I love doing it with my dogs.
So what would the dogs say about the Serum Run 2020? And if they could speak, what would they say about this experience?
I think they would say thank you for me giving them the opportunity to do what they're born to do and what they love to do, and finally for them to fulfill their potential. And I think they are thanking me. They're so smart. People know when you come back from races, the dogs know they've accomplished something. You go in the dog yard, they hunker down the first day, and you could just feel the hum. They're proud of themselves. This is different. It wasn't a race, and they figured it out. We're traveling with other dogs in the dog yard. The teams became one. Yesterday, they realized we weren't going at our own pace. We were following one musher after the other. It was a different day. They took their harnesses off. They realized, wow, we're not running anymore. They love the diversity on the trail, the wide open, then the twisty turny technical, which is kind of my favorite, and theirs too. And the wind. When we climbed Cape Nome yesterday, and it was windy, and for a little bit it was a whiteout, they love the wind. I love the wind. I said, we love the wind. They're like, yeah, we love the wind. Let's go into the wind. And their little dogs leading, they just go right under the wind. you know, so, you know, they feel what I feel. And, you know, when there was internal tension, you know, I would try to like, okay, because mushers know the dogs can feel that. So you want to try to dissipate that. But the mushing they got to do so much, so far, I think what my dogs were saying is thank you, Mom, and thank you for keeping us warm with those yummy new coats you got and all those yummy meat and fish and chicken skin snacks that you fed us. And we're glad you started giving us a little more kibble there at the end and, you know, get some of our weight back on and massaging us. When we did have down days, they got whole body massages. They would go up and down their spine, stretch, and, you know, which is why I wished we had another down day at intervals just for the dogs and for us. But, you know, they're safe and they're sound and they're healthy and I took care of them and they showed me what we're capable of. They taught me, and so I say thank you to them. And Ruby, you're right about me, and I know you're like, I want to do this too, and whatever it is you really want to do, I want you to, and you will, because you know that you can't, anything's possible. And I want to thank my mom for, you know, supporting me, and my sister and my brother and my family, knowing, yep, Martha's got to do this, so we're rooting for her.
So you're asking what kind of conversation would I hope our expedition inspires in others? Well, anybody could have done it. We weren't especially skilled or especially courageous. We all had a desire to spend time outside. Maybe to support a person we love in some cases. Maybe it was to spend more time with our dogs, or to just get away from what we do daily and see another part of the world. You know, that's why people travel, I think. So I want people to think that, hey, I could do that. And I've had a lot of people say, I'd like to do that. You know what? I am not special, but I just kept taking it moment by moment. And any one day would have been enough, I think. But, you know, we kept going and we kept wanting to keep going. But each day had a lot. It was very intense every day. So anybody can do it. That's my message.
Okay, excellent. I've heard that dog mushing leads you to the root of yourself. In what ways did you observe yourself and your team evolving on the trail?
I don't think I thought a lot about myself. I thought a lot about the dogs. I thought a lot about being prepared for what might be coming up. So every day that was a little bit different. We didn't know really what the trail would be like, but you always use your powers of observation to see what might be coming up so you can be ready for it. I thought a lot about my kids. That was probably, and my mom. It was really emotional on the trail because I was carrying my daughter's ashes, who died 4 years ago, and I talked to her a lot. So I don't know if that's why I came, but it was a big part of what I was out there. And then just being with the dogs, they required a constant attention, sometimes so much so that I would forget to look for trail markers. And then I would pray, like, please God, let there be another trail marker soon. So that would give me that confidence, because I wasn't scared to be lost because I always knew I could turn around and backtrack. But having that marker there really meant a lot. So I started talking to the markers when I'd see them, like, hey, marker, how's it going? You know, because that was good to see that. 50 miles is a long way, and there was many times I didn't see anyone for most of the day. You know, so it was good. It's a really good experience. I guess in that way you do get to know yourself better because you have to talk yourself up every once in a while. You know, but mostly you're just in the moment. You don't have time to analyze yourself. You're just responding or pre-responding. Like, oh, that's coming up. I got to be prepared for that. So that was, I don't know if other people got to know themselves. I got to feel myself, maybe. Does that answer your
That's
question?
lovely. Okay. During the Serum Run, you visited and interacted with numerous villages.
Uh-huh.
And what core cultural values did you find that you admire most about these communities?
So the Inupiaq school we stayed in, I'm not sure, I want to say it was possibly Koyuk. I can't remember which one it was, but there had been a conflict with me and one of the other mushers, and there was some tension. And when I read, they had a poster on the wall about their values, and it was cooperation, and I can't remember the others exactly, but they were all good core values that everyone should respect, hard work, things like that. And I thought, you know, I needed to see that right now because I didn't want what I was there for and who I want to be compromised by a conflict with another person. So as soon as I read that, it kind of changed. I was able to let go and just go, that's right. No. So I guess the cultural values is really what I want also for myself. So we all have a lot in common, you know, and I like the native culture. I wish we could interact more, but because of the villages being off the road system, we don't get out here much. And I do have friends that have lived in villages that have moved back on the road system where I live, and so I'm able to glean a little bit from them. But I have a lot of respect for the natives and what they can do in this environment. It's pretty impressive, and they've been very kind to us. Some of the women and many of the people rode by when they saw some of the teams. They're like, "Welcome to Unalakleet," or "Welcome to Shaktoolik," and Shaktoolik was my favorite. I thought Ruby would be, and Ruby was nice, but Shak was my favorite. I don't know why. Just felt good.
Was there a defining experience for you out on the trail?
Yes.
And can you tell us about it?
Okay, the defining moment for me on the trail, and everyone probably has completely different answers, was one day when my little red leader, Mars, had decided he didn't want to run where there was a little bit of wind and sea ice, and we were the first team. And I now think it's because he couldn't really sense the trail because we were on ice. And my drag brake, it was outside of Koyuk, had broken completely and had left the sled. So I had I really didn't have any brakes. I had a bar brake which just skittered along the ice and didn't do a lot. The dogs didn't figure out that I didn't have brakes until about halfway through the day. And then I had a young leader up front with one of my main leaders, and she kept going off the trail to play in the snow or play in the snow will pile up from the wind, and she was just all over the place. And my leader decided, well, hey, we're doing this. This is great, you know? So my Scarlet and Scamp decided to go off trail. I had no control over them. They just ran around, made like these giant crop circle situations. I had no control. Anything I said to them just went away. They didn't think it was important at the time. And we started heading back towards the trail. I was really glad. We made a complete 360, a big one. And I thought, good, I'll call them onto the trail. No, we went across the trail and straight out towards the sea. I was like, good Lord, what am I going to do, right? So we came to where the wind had piled up some snow. And I just dumped the sled over in it, and it was enough to stop them. And I went up and had a talk to them. And took my little red leader and put him back up front. He's like, I know, Mom, I'll take care of this. And so he got us back on the trail, and we were okay. But that was my defining moment of these dogs do what I want because they respect me, not because I'm in control. And so at one point they broke that and literally ran off with me. And after that, I spent a lot more time stopping and loving on them and keeping that connection because they do it because they want to, you know. And I never thought I was the boss of the team. I thought we all worked together, but at that one time they decided to take the reins. it was a pretty humbling moment when I realized, you know what? You know, this can go just about any direction at any time, so let's keep it together. That's my story.
Remember all that. My name is Frank Carruthers. I was snow machine support. I started out as Kirsten Bay's snow machine support, and I ended up being Julia's snow machine support. My role. I used to live in Tanana, so I driven dog teams between Ruby and Nenana, so I knew all the way there. So I was marking the trail a lot between Nenana and Tanana. And other times I was just sweep, which means I was picking up the stakes, making sure everybody got in safely. I can't really think of anything particularly extraordinary on my part. I was just done a lot of winter travel, and this was just another trip. I just happened to be with a different group of people. I knew the people from Nome, but I'd never met the other people before. So it wasn't as unique for me as it was for them. I did the Caltag portage for the first time. I'd never been over, well, from Ruby to Koyuk. I'd never been over that section in the wintertime, so that was a new experience.
What was your impression?
It was good. I mean, Phil and I drove our machines from Nome to Nenana, so we had a heck of a time on the Caltag portage because we got like 30 inches of snow dumped on us. So we spent 3 days breaking the trail out, trying to find the trail. So that made this coming back with the dog team seemed like a picnic.
I can imagine. That's so cool. What drew you to this trip? I know you know the trail. Why did you want to be on this journey?
Because I like to travel in the wintertime. You can go places. I don't like traveling on regular roads, you know. I'd never done the part of the trail I'd never been on in the wintertime, and I've traveled a lot with Phil, and he's a good person to travel with. And I know Kirsten and Stephanie, so that was kind of why I went.
The expedition visited several villages on the original SERUM Run trail. What core cultural values do you most admire about the people in the communities you visited?
Well, I lived in Tanana for almost 33 years. I lived in the Athabascan culture. It's kind of my, I could say, adopted culture. I really love being around the Athabascan people. Probably one of the most special moments on the trip was my friend Lloyd Charlie drove over from New Minto to Manly Hot Springs because he heard on Facebook I was going to be there, so he came over to see me. So that was really great. I always liked the hospitality of the people in the villages. I mean, that extends out to the Inupiaq and the Yupik cultures. You get down to the Yukon, mouth of the Yukon, along the Bering Sea, Norton Sound coast and everything. So I just love being in the villages.
What do you think their impression was of the group coming through?
A couple of the villages, we had kind of a good reception, but a lot of places were behind schedule. We don't get in until 10 o'clock at night, so there's really... I was expecting more contact with the villages. I thought we could get in there, you know, leave early in the morning, get there like 4 or 5 o'clock, and then you'd have time to do a little program in the evening, but it just did not work out that way. So,
Was that because of falling behind schedule early on, and then we were just sort of always playing catch up?
I don't know why it was. I mean, it could be because Phil and I never actually made it to Nenana. We caught up with the group in Old Minto. And took extra day at Manly, but that didn't get us going any earlier. So it's just, I don't know why it was, but we tried to rectify it, but it never did.
So biggest takeaway for you in close?
We had, aside from being a little bit cold on the Yukon River, it's been really, we didn't have any big storms or anything, so we've had good traveling weather. And I don't think I got stuck at all on the way back to Nome. The trail was all in. The Iron Dog had been over it, and a lot of people traveling between the villages. So it's been fun coming back.
Thank you. Tell me your name and tell me your role on this expedition.
Okay, well, my name is, that's an easy one. My name is Gil, Gil Van Sciver. I am a veterinarian. 63 years old. I retired, sold my practice in Delaware, and came to Alaska. I joined up with the Iditarod and was a checkpoint vet, and eventually ended up as the Nome vet because they needed, some people needed a veterinarian in Nome. So I started doing clinics. Then I got to know all the characters that are, a lot of the characters from Nome that are you're about to interview. The Mushers, Phil Prismont, and I was invited. They needed a veterinarian. I was invited to go, and I've never done anything like this before. Nothing close, quite honestly. Winter camping in Alaska is a unique thing to do and is very specialized, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot the hard way. I ended up with frostbite on a finger that's pretty severe. Actually, all my fingers are somewhat frostbit. Anyway, it was quite an adventure, and what called me is, you know, basically I retired young, traded time for money, and decided I would do some things with my remaining years, and I wanted something to talk about in the nursing home, so I decided to retire and ended up coming to Alaska. So.
What was your protocol for monitoring the dogs on the trail? And do you have a philosophy for caring and supporting the dogs?
Yeah, I would check in with the mushers, and I would watch the dogs. You know, I would watch the dogs, and I could see a lot by their attitude. You know, when I was out on the trail, you can just tell how the dog is in the harness, whether they're you know, happy and energetic, and or whether they're struggling, you know, and so that's a big clue. And then after they're done for the day, I would go around and I would talk to the mushers and say, how's your dog doing? Are you having any problems with any dogs? And we would talk. We would discuss different things that were going on. Some of the things, there's limited amounts of what you can really do. Medications are not that helpful sometimes.
What was your experience in the villages, and what kind of impression did the people there make on you, and what was one of your favorite memories?
Villages are pretty special. It's a whole different way of life. The people are happy. That was one of my first impressions, that they're happy people, by and large. They were real grateful to have somebody come through and help them with their dogs. They were hospitable and open, and they would offer us food and yeah, they were just, it was a warm place. It was a warm place. So, yeah, I love the villages. One of my favorite parts. And talking to the people, you know, they have a pretty good idea of what's going on in the outside world, but there's, you know, they're also living in a very secluded area, so which is interesting. It makes them very interesting people to talk to. Yeah.
And now that you're about to cross the finish line, was this journey the experience that you expected?
I didn't really know what to expect. I knew it was going to be challenging. I knew it was going to be rigorous. I knew it was going to be spectacular. One of the biggest surprises I think that I adapted to being out in life way below zero, you know, as easily as I did. We were able to persevere in extreme conditions, and it all worked out. So, yeah, that's the main thing. I was surprised by our ability, our resilience out there. So, you think you're tired, you think you're exhausted, and then all of a sudden you find out that you get a second wind, and you just put your head down, put one foot in front of the other, and next thing you know, you're off and you've got it done. So.
Wise words. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Tell me your name and explain your role on this journey. And what were your key day-to-day concerns, generally speaking?
Well, my name's Lou Packer. I'm from Wausau. I'm a doctor. And my day-to-day concerns were what was the next disaster that was going to befall us. You know, what life-threatening situation would be coming up. We had so many. Every day. We would reach the end of the day and go, oh, there hasn't been a disaster today. I'm not kidding. It was pretty funny. Some of it wasn't.
What drew you to this expedition? Was it the thrill of an adventure? The poetry of Alaska as the last frontier?
You know, the poetry of Alaska is certainly a drawing element. I mean, you think about that Robert Service poem, but I think wasn't he Canadian or something like that? You know, the spell of the Yukon, and we definitely found some valleys all filled with hush to the brim while we were there. I mean, there was a lot of valleys like that. It's a great poem. You should read it. I had run Iditarod a long time ago, scratched, and it felt like unfinished business getting to know him, you know. And my friend Kathy and her husband are on this. He decided to leave, but she continued on. And she talked me into it. She said, hey, Lou, I want you to come on this. And at first I wasn't so interested because I figured it might be cold. And you know what? I was right. It was cold. It was like, I don't know. My thermometer quits working at minus 20, and the bulb was, you could see the bulb was like half into the bulb, you know, gone. We figure it's minus 50. We did 2 nights of that. That was rough, camping outside at minus 50. It was really something. You know, one of our concerns is that you're gonna die because you would be in, like when we were going out here, we were at trail sweeps, and which meant that we had to wait and stay behind the last dog musher, so we had to shut our machines off and just sit there in the silence for a while. And you'd wait about an hour for the dogs to go, and then you'd catch up and wait about an hour, and you get pretty cold doing that, and you start thinking, wow, we were out here on the Yukon River, it's 30, 40 below zero. You know, there's this little ribbon of trail about this wide, and that's your only connection to the rest of the world, is that little ribbon of trail. And over there, there's no ribbon. Over there, there's no ribbon. Just little, that's it. You step off that, you're lost. You know. interesting concept, you know. You look up at the sky and you realize you make a mistake at these temperatures and you've got a real problem on your hands, you know, real problem.
The group all trained so hard for this expedition, but there were a few injuries on the trip. Can you describe some of the circumstances and some of the bigger problem-solving moments you faced?
Well, I mean, from a medical standpoint, I mean, clearly, you know, Kirsten's injuries were the worst. You know, obviously, you know, getting run down by a speeding snow machine is, you know, pretty terrible, and fracturing her leg, and all the things that happened to her, and intracranial bleed, and just terrible. We were very, very fortunate that this happened close into town, within about 5 miles of town. We were very fortunate that it happened. They were also fortunate that we were in a village that was actually had a beautiful medical facility, absolutely beautiful. Had a beautifully staffed and functioning EMS system. Everything worked fantastic. And, the doctor there, I can't remember her name right now, was great. The EMS people were great. We were able to evacuate her off the trail in very short order before hypothermia really set in, because we're very concerned about that. You get injured on, you're already cold, and then you get hurt, and then you get cold quick. And so that wasn't an issue. And then, you know, that was a whole big, scary thing for all of us, including Kirsten and her family, to go through. You know, being injured like that, you know, really terrible, really terrible, and then you worry. One of the girls that was first on the scene was so traumatized by it that she had to leave. She was absolutely traumatized. The snow machine was like on top of her. There was blood everywhere. Suze was very traumatized. You know, that's a whole area of discussion, her injuries and everything, but the people there were great. I talked to the doctors at Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. They were great. So that was, things couldn't have gone any more smoothly for her. You know, other injuries we had, I had treated like two or three people, 4 people that were hypothermic. You know, that had made just a couple mistakes, maybe just one at -50, and they got hypothermic, and so then I had to take care of them, and then also save a little to take care of myself, so I wouldn't become a victim as well. It was, that one night was pretty tough when some of our gear had gotten delayed up the trail by about 10 hours, so we had 2 missing tents. And in the first night of camping, one guy had gone into overflow. Robert had gotten wet, and he got hypothermic. So me and Gil had got the tent up, which was very difficult to do in 50 below, because the tent is nothing's designed for -50. The elastic in the tubes wouldn't work properly. It was very hard. And so we got him in the tent, out of his clothes and into dry clothes and into his sleeping bag. So he did okay. Then Gil got hypothermic at the same time, and then because he wasn't taking care of himself enough. So he, trying in his effort to help Robert, he got hypothermic. So then I made food for them and got some hot food in them, and then they perked right up. So that was really good. So just mild hypothermia, so really hypothermia is, you know, really the big threat there, because, you know, you're out there on the trail, and, you know, not wanting to sound dramatic, but you can feel, you know, death just right over there, screw up, and it's coming for you. You know, it's right there. You know, and maybe that's what's so interesting about dog mushing, you know, because I used to run dogs, and you go out there and you just go, yeah. So you'd say to the weather, bring it on. Let's see what I'm made of, and what you're made of, and what you can do to me. And you go out there and there's these just death-defying, life-threatening situations. I mean, no one in their right mind goes camping at 50 below zero, let alone 30 below zero. We would have loved 30 below zero. God, no one in their right mind does that.
Tell me about your experiences in the villages.
Oh, it was really
And tell me about the impression that the people made on you.
You know, people were really nice. Everyone was very friendly. People were very helpful, curious, want to know about, us, our group, and what we were doing. And the kids especially were so sweet. All kids are cute. And the kids are all very willing to help and just loved that. We were so happy to have any help. They would pick up the booties off the ground and put them in a bag for us. It helped break the straw. They were just had a great time petting the dogs. They loved that. And the kids were really nice. And the people, that would help us, were like the people who were in charge of community centers, in charge of schools, the principals. They were all really great and all very helpful, willing to give you anything you needed.
Back, can you share a favorite memory?
Oh.
What moments do you remember as being awe-inspiring, or what's one of the favorite moments?
I think the sun had set in the west and the moon was rising in the east, and I looked up and found Polaris right at the end of the Big Dipper and was oriented myself, and I just watched it. The sun slowly sink below the horizon, and then the moon come up, and then Polaris come out, and it was pretty neat, just to be there on the trail. And it was on the Yukon, and the temperature plummeted, and but it felt really special to be there. You felt privileged to be there on the river and to be seeing this, because honestly, very few people go into the wilderness other than a few steps off the path at the national park. And very few people venture into the true Alaskan wilderness and look at it. Very few. And we felt very privileged to be able to do that. At least I did. And there's lots of favorite moments. That's just one of them.
Thank you.
Sure.
"13 intrepid, capable, and determined individuals set off for a course few would dare to dream. Why did you make this trip, Cody?"
That's a good question. I have wanted to see. I've wanted to do a road trip up to Alaska for a long time, and I've wanted to see more of Alaska because I'd only been up here once in the summer when I was, I think, 13 years old. And this just sounded like a wonderful opportunity where, I'd worked with Marla before, and she was going to be doing this and asked me to come along, and figured it was the best way to get my foot in the door into something like this, and to basically cross the entirety of Alaska, or not quite, but about as far as you can go. What was my role? I guess the shortest answer is that my role was to support Marla, to be hauling gear for her on my sled behind my snow machine, and to be just helping her with all the things she needs help with to get down the trail. So, having things ready for her when she arrives at the next checkpoint, and helping move drop bags and all of that. But in the wider group, I also had responsibilities of just picking up any slack wherever I could, of trying to help other snow machiners get unstuck when they went into the deep snow or got off the trail, and being the trail sweep, kind of picking up trail markers after everyone else has gone through, and just generally, trying to help morale and, hauling hot water out to the mushers to feed their dogs, and sort of all of the little things to help make everything go pretty smoothly.
What were you best at?
I don't know what I was best at. I got a lot better at driving a snow machine and at being able to get myself unstuck and to not get stuck in the first place, and also then to figure out how to help other people get unstuck. And just, like I said, doing all the little things, just trying to, anticipate what people need and, bring them water and straw and help haul things in and out of, sometimes the dogs are, like last night, the dogs were staying, a quarter of a mile away from where we were staying, and so just hauling things back and forth, helping set up camp, when we're camping out and we don't have a building to stay in, and setting up camp and tearing it down, and all of the little things.
Okay. Was there a defining experience for you out on the trail?
I think, almost every day, just seeing the scenery here, seeing like the sunset in Ruby, and seeing the moonrise in Elam, and those villages are up on hills and Ruby overlooking the Yukon River, and Elam overlooking the coast, and just incredible vantage points, and just seeing the more or less, not entirety of the Alaska interior and coast, but seeing enough of it to get a good sampling. And as far as a defining moment, I don't know if there's any one defining moment, but
One of your favorites?
Well, and again, I wouldn't say a favorite, but a defining moment, I think, would be the first day that I was the trail sweep. We'd camped out on the Yukon River overnight, and we had packed up everything and gotten all of our dog teams out, and all but me and another snow machiner were left. And she took off down the trail and got about 100 yards down the trail, and her snow machine, ski went off the trail a little bit and into some overflow, and she got stuck. And I hadn't even packed my sled yet, and I tried to go out there with my snow machine and get her unstuck, and I get stuck trying to do that. And I think that's a defining moment, because it's an illustration of some of the hardships that we've been through, but still, we were able to, after spending a few hours trying to get ourselves unstuck and getting totally soaked from the knee down, like I ended up pouring, I think, a cup of water out of each of my boots. But we had set up the tent and got a fire going, and we're able to take care of ourselves again. And so I think it's a defining moment of how much struggle we've had over the trip, but how well we've been able to figure it out and get it done.
And just reading a little bit about you, you have a passion for process and originality, learning and mastery. How has this expedition expanded your repertoire?
Well, I didn't have that much snow machine experience, so definitely an expansion of my repertoire is just like how to ride a snow machine, how to do so in some deeper snow without getting stuck, how to try to get through overflow, and how to help other people with that, then that's definitely been a learning experience. And I wasn't mushing on this trip, so I didn't learn much about mushing because I wasn't the one doing it. But I think just learning also more about the villages and getting to meet people and see some of that way of life, I think was sort of an expansion of my worldview, if not, necessarily any hard skills, if that makes sense.
Well, that's actually my next question, and my final question is your experience in the villages and what kind of impression they made on you.
There are lots of great memories from the villages, and all of the experiences were wonderful. Everyone was welcoming, and I think one of my favorite things to do was with almost every vet clinic that we did, I was helping out, and that's probably the most direct way that we actually got to interact with the people of the villages was by helping them vaccinate their dogs and a few cats, and actually getting to meet them, whereas most of the people on this trip had good interactions with the villagers that they met, but didn't have as much of a reason to actually meet that many of them because they were too busy taking care of their dogs and just trying to do the things they need to do to continue on their trip. So the vet clinics was definitely a way to feel like we're contributing to the villages and not just sort of mooching off of them by staying in their schools. And a great way to meet some people, have some conversations with them about what we're doing and what they're doing, and Gil had a lot of conversations with people about their snow machines and all of that. So yeah, that was probably what I got the most out of there.
Can you tell us how you got that bump on your nose?
That's actually a little bit of frostbite. There was actually coming out of Ruby, I couldn't find my goggles, and I got about a quarter of a mile down the trail and knew I had gotten them out of the school, but didn't have them on my machine, and so I unhooked my sled and went back up to the school to look around for them and couldn't find them. And turns out that Phil, who had left far ahead of me, had picked them up from wherever they were and taken them with him because he thought they were one of ours. But I had a day without any goggles, and I didn't do well enough. I didn't even notice until after the fact that I got a little frostbite on my nose. But it's already healing pretty well, so I think it'll be all right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Bill Estelle, and I'm from Palmer, Alaska. I'm 65, and I was born in Palmer and am a district court judge there. And I'm on this trip with my wife, Kathleen Frederick, who is a musher.
Why did you decide to go on this trip? When did it first begin germinating in your mind as something real?
The opportunity to go on this journey came up when my wife found out about it. She is a musher and has an active kennel, and her dogs have been training. They've run 100, 200, and 300 mile races this year, and so they're trained up. And when she found out about this, it's on her bucket list to mush her dogs to Nome. She raised the kennel and was in the Iditarod in 2010 and had a tragic end to her race at the bottom of Dalzell Gorge, which became chapter 10 in Craig Medred's book, Graveyard of Dreams. So she didn't finish, but it's been her goal to mush her dogs to Nome. When this opportunity arose, it seemed like a great chance to see part of the state that I haven't seen, which is the middle Yukon villages. And when I heard that Kirsten Bay had signed up, I thought probably these folks knew what they were doing, because I had known Kirsten back in the 80s when she worked for a while in Palmer, and I knew she was solid and competent, and if she thought this was a venture worth joining, that it was going to work out. So it was a great opportunity for me just to go on an adventure with my sweetheart.
What's one of your favorite memories?
Well, the opportunity to see these villages was attractive because I'd lived in the bush and had visited a number of the Kuskokwim Delta villages and up as far as Grayling on the Yukon, and had never seen that area between the road system and Nome, and nor had I been to Nome before. So this was a good opportunity to see that part of the state that's still sort of the real Alaska. And it was, I enjoyed the villages. I was impressed with the schools and how well behaved and happy the children all seemed to be. That was very reassuring. And also that they were, in anticipation of our arrival, studying the SERUM RUN. On the wall of one gym, a third grade class had made a big map of the SERUM RUN. And I thought that that's something that we brought, not only because we had a veterinarian that could do, had his own serum for doing rabies shots and things like that for the folks, but also that these kids could come to understand that the SERUM RUN wasn't just one person, it was 20 people, and it was heroic, and they need to know that it was heroic, and what was it about their culture that prepared these people to be in a position to do something like that. This was 20 men running their segments, but it was also so many communities and so many dog teams and so many people loaning their best dogs to these people. And it wasn't something that they had planned ahead. It was something, there's an emergency. It requires people to be willing to mush on through the darkness and trust their lead dog to get them to the next outpost where they could transfer the serum. And for these kids, I think it's really valuable to understand that their culture prepared them for that, and that's why it succeeded. And it was just nice to see that they are focusing on that, and they are teaching the kids, and the kids are studying it. And so it's just been a wonderful trip and some beautiful country.
What were the experiences along the trail that surprised you?
First, that tent camping at 50 below zero is different than tent camping at zero. That surprised me, how everything that you use acts differently. And the preparations, I think, were good for that, because we came through it well, but it was interesting how everything at 50 below does not work the same as it does at regular temperatures. The other things that surprised me were, I guess, just how much fun the dogs seemed to be having. It's just, oh boy, today we get to get up again and go play follow the leader. And when you think about it, that's sort of how they evolved, is they made a living by getting up every day and playing follow the leader, and some days you find the caribou and some days you don't, but it's another day to run. And even at temperatures like that, they were not reluctant, and they were just excited. And of course, Kathy's dogs being trained up to do, 70 miles a day, doing these segments, they were enthusiastic throughout. And it's just good to see, and I can understand why dogs became the most important mode of transportation in the state before airplanes and snow machines, because they just love to run, love to pull, and love to get together and do things as a group. I guess the pack, the follow the leader, is sort of in their blood, and an opportunity to get up and go another day is just something that they smile about. So I guess that surprised me, is even at 50 below, they're just as enthusiastic as ever.
As a machiner, what kinds of problems did you have to solve on the trail? And what kinds of things did you have to figure out?
Well, the snow machining aspect is basically to pull the sled with supplies, with the equipment and the dog food and the human food and the straw, and of course a dog box in case one of the dogs needs to take a rest. They can ride for a while, and all of the supplies have to get moved, and it relieves the musher of having to pack so much weight in the sled, which makes everything easier. So a lot of it was just the preparation and planning ahead and figuring out how much of all the different sorts of fuel for the horses and fuel for the dogs and fuel for the humans, and how to be prepared for the contingencies, whether you run into overflow and everything gets wet and you have to have dry everything, and you have to have the tools to deal with that, or in deep snow you have to plan for all the contingencies, and there's a lot of logistics. But when it comes down to it, it's just a matter of trying to follow the trail. And the big challenge was when the snow is 4 feet of powder and you're on a trail that's just as wide as the snow machine. The most common setback was getting one ski off the track, and suddenly you're tipping into deep powder, and that happened a number of times. But you develop your technique for disconnecting the sled and getting the snow machine rolled back up to vertical and back on the trail, and pulling the sled back up on the trail, hitching them together, and away you go. And so that was something that I hadn't foreseen in quite how long it takes to work when you're thrashing around in waist-deep powder snow. But if you get the hang of it and stay with both skis on the track and don't manage to let the side slopes or the sharp turns or the narrow trail going through the trees zigging and zagging, once you get the hang of it, it goes much more smoothly. And part of the trail, we've followed part of the Telegraph Trail, some of the Mail Trails, part of the Iron Dog Trail, the Iditarod Trail, and the part where the Iron Dog racers had been through was bumpy because of the speed. They create sort of moguls, and going over that with a machine with a 12-foot sled behind you gets to be challenging, just because you have to time things so that everything tips just right, otherwise you're kind of taking a beating. So that was interesting. Other than that, I think the most challenging thing was getting over the Caltag portage up over through the hills, and so much of it is side sloping, and that's just an accident waiting to happen. So it takes a lot of care to get a machine through, and we had any number of setbacks, but we were able to get through, and it was very interesting. The Caltag portage is historic. I understand that it was the gateway to trade with the interior, and when the Russians came, the local folks were organized enough to keep it a secret, so the Russians couldn't take over the fur trade, and they had to use the Yukon River instead of the direct route. And so just knowing that that was something that was that important to the people and to the population and how they made a living was interesting to see, and I can understand why it's worth the effort to go over the portage, because the other way is so much longer. And it was interesting just to finally get to Unalakleet. We had a mishap up in the pass where I wrenched my back, and it was getting worse as we went, but I was able to make it to the tripod cabin and then past Old Woman Cabin and into Unalakleet, and then I came on to Nome and waiting here for my wife, and there's another person driving the machine to Nome to make sure that it all comes to a successful conclusion. So it's all in all been very interesting.
Your wife, Kathy, was a musher on this journey with you. What was it that drew both of you on to this adventure, and were your reasons different from hers for doing this?
My wife has been mushing for years, and this has been one of her bucket list goals to mush her dogs to Nome, so this opportunity was ideal, and we're not getting any younger, so now's the time. So, that was important, and so my role was to go along to see the countryside and to see the people and to do some more winter Arctic travel and basically to support her, as the snow machine support is crucial for the dogs to be able to make it without tiring under the weight of the freight they would have to carry. So it was a good opportunity for me to join her in an adventure and something that she's wanted to do for many, many years. So it was just an opportunity for us to do something together that most couples never have the chance to do. So.
Favorite memories?
Favorite memories are just seeing that things came together and that she was successful and that her dogs were healthy and happy, and just it was a good time for them because they're seeing new countryside and they're out together and they're out with other teams that they've not met before, and all the teams seem to be very well organized and well behaved, and for her to have her team out there, as she puts it, it's camping out at 20 below with a dozen of your best friends when she's out on a race, and that just to see her having such a great time and the team having such a great time was very, very fulfilling and just a real success. And it's an interesting group, and we had never met before we arrived at Nenana, so it was interesting in a group dynamics way of getting together and getting organized and figuring out the best way to do things. And I think everybody found it challenging but also enjoyable, and we were very fortunate with the weather. A lot of blue skies and sunshine, and so far that has held, but we'll see if they get to Nome before the impending storm arrives. But.
Okay, my name is Martin Penupchuk, and I live in Unalakleet, but I moved to Kaltag. SERUM RUN came in, I met them, all there, and they took off down the trail, and Phil came back and asked for help. And the lady in Kaltag lead her to me. That's how I get to know about the SERUM RUN. They needed help. So I went out to help them. I was supposed to go far to Unalakleet, but I went all the way to Nome.
Why? What happened?
Bill, I don't know, his back gave out, so I drove his snow machine to Nome. That's how I get to go with the SERUM RUN. Helped them out. It was a great adventure. I loved it. They were so happy for me that I did it for them. helped them out.
How did you help them the most?
The main thing was dog food. That was the main. I was carrying the dog food most of the. That's what I was doing, and I was in the back of the pack, and that was great. Phil was a good leader. He was happy for me. I heard a lot of stories about that. He was happy I came along.
What was he happy about?
Got somebody that know what he's doing, I guess. We got to White Mountain, and they're gonna put us in a fire department place, and it was kind of cold in there. And I asked Phil, what's next door? He didn't know. I said, I'm gonna go check. And that was an elder's house where they eat. And I know a lady there, Rita Buck, and she said, you guys are staying in that cold house next door? I said, yeah. She said, no, you guys can stay in here if you want. Go tell them before they set up. So I did, and Phil, he was so happy. He was so happy he get to sleep in a warm house at White Mountain. Bathroom, running water. He was happy.
Have you done much dog mushing yourself?
Back when I was younger, high school days, I used to go with my cousin Clarence Torg Jr. He I did it out in '74, I think. I had fun. I used to be with him for a while.
What's it like working with the dogs?
No, just I would cook for him. Yeah, cook for help him cook. I would get the fire going, everything, and he would just put the dog food in. And I helped with the Iron Dog. This is my first help with the SERUM Run, and I really loved it, enjoyed it. I would like to do it again. It's a lot of fun.
Tell me your relationship with this whole regional trail system.
That's a tough one for me. I just did it on my own. Back in the day, I used to mark the trail for Iron Dog. That's how I get to know. And then it just go farther and farther. Yeah, I did it on my own mainly. There were stakes up before, but they were kind of down, and I knew the where to go, and it was okay. Just marking the trail back in the days. But when they picked me up in Caltech, yeah, they took us something like 13 hours to get 28 miles. We keep getting stuck. They needed help real bad. Phil was so happy that I came and helped him. That's how the trail thing, I just did it on my own. The main thing, I know Unacleat area, we're all good. I drove to Nome in '99, and I know the trail a little here and there. Like from here to, it's kind of hard to go from here, Nome to Topcock. That's a tough trail. Whiteout conditions. It's real tough. You got to know what you're doing. It's a smart game between here and there. It's kind of scary at times. Because, they got the stakes a little too far, I think. But it is a little spooky sometimes. I do get scared between here and Topcock. A little bit. I do. I mean, I don't know Nome too good. I really, I like Gollum, I know a little bit. Ilum, a little bit. Quirk, all along the villages, I know a little. And the main thing was in Shaktoolik area, I know that well. The bay, I know that. But anyways, it's awesome trail. It's just
What's awesome about it?
nice views. It's just nice country. But during the years I've been coming to Nome, it's nighttime. First time I ever did it during the day. Get to see the country. That was awesome. I like that.
The mushers and the machiners have all spoken so so warmly and appreciatively of their time in the villages, meeting the people, meeting the children. What do you think made them so happy to be able to stop in the villages?
For one thing, it was a little windy along the trail. Every village they stop in, they're happy to get warm and have something hot. We stayed at the schools all the way along the trail, except White Mountain. We stayed at the elders' place. They were happy, the villagers, the people that came see the mussers come in, they were so happy. They were great. They were happy.
And all those dogs.
All the dogs coming in, especially the young ones. They just happy to see the dogs. I don't know why, but they're happy. Every village was awesome. They were nice. They welcomed the mussers. They're just so happy to see the mussers. Something different coming into their town, I guess. The only one that never came out was Shaktulek. They didn't really help us out. We went right through. So, I guess they were scared of the virus. That's the only thing I can think of.
Are you worried about the...
Yes, I'm really worried about the virus. My wife wants me to get out of Nome ASAP. I tell her I can't, the weather. She wants me to get out of Nome. She's scared of the virus herself. Me too. I'm really scared. I don't want to get it. And it's kind of scary. My wife, when I talked to her a few minutes ago, don't stop in villages. Keep going. So I'm going to listen to her and try to make it all the way to Caltech. I'm going to try. Because of the virus thing, she don't want to get sick in her own home in Caltech. She don't want me to bring the sickness there. So I'm going to listen to her and just stay away from people. Because I got, from here to Unalakleet, I got a lot of relatives. I know a lot of people. It's just, I do want to visit them, but the wife says no, because of the virus. She doesn't want me to bring it home, get her sick. So, I'm going to have to keep going. I can't, I'm just going to have to wave. I'll probably holler at them, tell them I got to keep going. I'm going to try to at least go to Unalakleet, spend the night, and go Caltech next day. That's my plan. She said, I know you got a lot of relatives along that coast. Please don't stop to them. Please don't. So I'm going to listen to her. I do got, almost every village I got relation.
Gosh, just a week ago, if you had been coming through these villages with this COVID virus, it would have been a very different situation for the SERUM Run expedition.
Yeah, it would have been. It would have been real tough. I don't know, it was a good run for them though. I know that. It was good weather actually, all the way from Caltech to Nome. The SERUM Run, they really lucked out with the weather. They beat the weather, we beat the wind. It was great. It was just right timing. We had no storm, it was nice. Coming into Nome, we stayed back at the mussers all the way from Safety Roadhouse to Nome. We stayed like about a mile away. We wanted them to come into Nome first. And we came in right after them. But like in the villages, they would leave before us. We would wait like 2-3 hours in the village for them to get ahead of us. Then when we catch up to them, we would, they would keep on going and look at us and wave. Then we would go behind them and go way around them so we won't scare the dogs. And just keep on going and then wait for them at next village. The mussers, the 4 mussers that went through this, it's just I wish they would have got up earlier. Like make a move like 9, 10 in the morning instead of 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They're real. But we made it. I'm happy. The mussers were happy. They were happy I followed, helped them out. It was great. I loved it. They were so happy that I helped them out. I'm grateful for it. I would like to do it again if I could. I like that.
Thank you so much.
Kriana. Kriana Pakshilidamna. Thank you.
Beautiful day and everything's going my way, 'cause I am walking my path with the flow